I was a fisherman. It was there that I met him. My brother, Andrew, and I had been fishing all night. It's hard work, dragging the nets in and out. And that night, we caught nothing, not one fish. We pulled the boat up on shore and began cleaning our nets. It was then that we saw him. We had heard about this one called Jesus. And here he came, followed by a large crowd of people. He came up to me and he said, "Simon." How did he know my name? "Simon, may I sit in your boat while I speak to the people?" I said, "Certainly, Master." He sat in my boat and I pulled out from the shore just a bit. And he sat in the boat and he spoke to the crowd. I listened. I had heard about him. I'd heard that he had healed people, gave the blind their sight, and made the lame to walk, had even cast out demons. But now as he spoke, I heard him speak as one who had true authority. His words captivated me. They spoke into my heart like no rabbi ever did. When he was done speaking and the crowd dispersed, he turned to me and said, "Simon, push out into the deep water and cast your nets on the other side." I smiled. I thought to myself, this man doesn't know much about fishing. I said, "Master, we've worked all night and we haven't caught anything." But then something touched my heart. And I looked at him and I said, "But at your command, I will cast out the nets." We pushed off, my brother and I, and we threw the net. And as it hit the water, there was a giant swarm of fish, more than we'd ever seen. Hundreds and hundreds of fish, big fish. It began to drag the net down. We started to pull them in. The boat was loaded. We called James and John, our partners, "Come with the other boat." We filled both boats until they almost began to sink. We pulled to the shore. And I floundered in through the water and I fell at his feet and I said, "Lord, depart from me, for I am a sinful man." And he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Simon, do not be afraid. From now on, you will be catching men. Come, follow me." And Andrew and I left our boats, and James and John left their boats, and we followed him. And in the days ahead, he chose 12, and we were among them. What we have seen, I've seen him calm storms, feed thousands with a little boy's lunch, turn water into wine, make the paralyzed walk, and yes, raise the dead. I believe he is the Messiah, the one who is called to come to save us, God's people. One day, he took us far north to Caesarea Philippi. And he sat us down in a ring, and he said, "So, who do people say that I am?" And we said, "Well, some say you're Jeremiah or Moses or Isaiah or one of the prophets, and some say that you're John the Baptist risen from the dead." And he looked at me and he said, "But who do you say that I am?" And something touched my heart. And I said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And he looked at me and he said, "Flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. From now on, you will be called Peter," which means rock. "And on this rock, I will build my church." From that day on, I led the disciples. He had chosen me. He'd given me a new name. I was Peter. Not Simon anymore, but Peter. And I'll be catching men. And I would be one of his foremost men when the kingdom came. When he established his kingdom. Hadn't he said I was Peter, the rock? One day, he took just 3 of us, myself and James and John, and he took us high up on a mountain. And there, as he stood before us, he was transfigured. He shone like the sun, radiant. And he said to a Moses and Elijah who were standing there about his departure, his exodus in Jerusalem. I fell down on my face. I didn't know what I was saying. I said, "Lord, it is good that we are here. I'll make 3 shelters, one for you, and one for Moses, and one for Elijah. We'll stay here." And suddenly there was a great cloud that covered the mountain, and a voice said, "This is my beloved Son. Listen to him." As I looked up, the cloud disappeared. And Jesus was just as he had been before. It was shortly after that Jesus said, "We are headed to Jerusalem." Jerusalem. Oh, there he will be crowned king. The kingdom will be established. But then he turned to us all and said, "There the Son of Man will be arrested and betrayed. And there he will suffer and he will die on a cross and then rise again." I said, "No, Lord. No, this will not happen to you." And he looked at me in the eye and he said, "Peter, get behind me, Satan. For you're not putting your mind on the things of God, but the things of man. As we journeyed 2 more times, he spoke of going to the cross, this crucifixion. Our hearts were burdened. But when we came to Jerusalem, he was welcomed into the city by thousands, crying out, Hosanna, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the King of Israel. The moment was here. On Thursday of that week, he sent 2 of our number ahead and said, go, you will find an upper room. There I will eat the Passover with you. For it was the great feast of the Jews. Hundreds of thousands of people were gathered in Jerusalem. What a perfect moment. We found the upper room just as he had said. We gathered, and as we ate at the table, he looked among us and became sad. And he said, today, one of you will betray me this very night. I said, surely not I, Lord. Not I. Judas went out to give something to the poor, I had thought at the time. And then Jesus took some of the hidden bread, and he took it and he broke it and he said, this is my body which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. Eat it. And we ate. And then he took the cup, the 3rd cup of thanksgiving, and he said, take and drink. This cup is the new covenant poured out for you in my blood for the forgiveness of your sins. And we drank. What did this mean? As we rose to go from there, he turned to me and he said, Peter, Satan has demanded to sift you like wheat. But I have prayed for you. And when you turn and repent, strengthen your brothers. I looked at him. I said, Lord, I'm ready to go to prison or even death for your sake. And he said, oh, Peter, before the rooster crows tomorrow morning, you will deny me 3 times. Then he turned and he said, who here has a sword? I grasped mine under my robe. He said, you'll soon need it. What did he mean? We journeyed, as we usually did, down to the valley of the Kidron and across to the garden on the Mount of Olives. And there we gathered, and he took, again, myself and James and John, and called us to go with him. And we gathered, and he said, I'm going a little further. You pray here. And he came, and he prayed. I saw him praying, and he began to pray so earnestly that the sweat that came from his brow had blood in it. He said, Father, please take this cup of suffering from me. Yet not what I want, but what you want. He prayed a long time. Suddenly I felt his hand on my shoulder. Peter. I had fallen asleep. Could you not pray with me even 1 hour? 3 times he prayed. 3 times we fell asleep. But the 3rd time when he awakened us, he said, now arise, my betrayer is at hand. This is the moment of darkness. There they were. Sure enough, it was Judas leading them. The whole crowd with clubs and swords and torches. I grasped my sword. This is what I had feared. And they came to Jesus. And they reached out for him. And I drew the sword and I slashed. And I cut off the servant's ear. And Jesus said, "No more of this. Put your sword away, for this is their hour." And he healed the servant. I fled, as did all the other disciples, into the darkness, and they took him away. I followed in the darkness behind. They were taking him to the high priest's palace back up on the other side of the Kidron. John had some inside contacts there, and he got me into the courtyard. And there in the courtyard, I could hear shouting going on. I couldn't understand everything that was being said, but it didn't sound like it was going well. This trial went on, and I began to grow cold. I came over close to where there was a fire set, warming my hands. I was shaking. This is not the way it was supposed to happen. I saw a young girl looking at me. I covered my face, but she kept looking at me, staring at me. Finally, she said, You there. You're one of them. I saw you with him, this Jesus. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know the man. And a little while later, as I tried to pull away, another person came up to me and said, Yes, you were with him. And I said, No, I do not know him. I do not know him. And then a third, Yes, it's you. You speak like a Galilean. You must have been with him. And I swore a mighty oath. And I said, I do not know him, by God. And it was at that moment a rooster crowed. And I turned. And there was Jesus being led across the courtyard. And he turned and he looked at me. And I remembered, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. What have I done? What have I done? I have denied him. I said I would go to prison and die with him. I denied that I know I am no rock. And I ran out. And I wept. John found me. And we went to the place where we were staying. And all day Saturday, we were in grief and prayed. And all I could think of was, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. I heard they took him away. They took him before the governor. And they beat him. And they pressed the crown of thorns upon his head, and they made him carry a cross. And they took him to Golgotha, and they pounded the nails into his hands and his feet. And he hung there and said, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Sunday morning, some of the women came to where we were staying. And they said, we've been to the tomb. They've rolled the stone away. He is not there. The angel said he has risen. What? I ran to the tomb with John, but there was no body there. What could this mean? A little while later, Jesus came to me and to all. And he drew me aside. And he said, Peter, the very mention of that name makes me hurt inside. Peter, do you love me? And I said, Jesus, you know everything. You know that I love you. And he looked at me and said, well, then feed my sheep. And a second time, he said, Peter, do you love me? And I said, Jesus, you know everything. You know I love you. He said, feed my lambs. And a third time, 3 times, he said, Jesus said to me, Peter, do you love me? And I wept. I was grieved because he said 3 times, do you love me? And I said, Jesus, you know everything. You know I love you. And he said, feed my sheep. I thought I was something. So proud. The foundation of the church. But now I know that he is the cornerstone. And I am just one of the living stones built into him. But he loves me. And he forgave me. I'll never forget that terrible night and how I turned my back on him. But I'll never forget that he turned his face toward me and it was full of mercy.